All right, so I want to make a video this week, and surprise, surprise, it's all over the news. I want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and everything that's going around with the administration and Trump, and talking about basically all the news that has come out with them denying that anything happened and releasing videotape and all the insanity that's been surrounding it. I made a video a couple of weeks ago on the exact same topic, and I think I have already been proven out, or it's already been proven out to have been probably correct. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take a look at a conversation between Tucker Carlson and Sagar and Enjeti. Tucker Carlson probably needs no introduction, and Sagar is one of the two main hosts of Breaking Points, which is kind of a right meets left conversational news outlet. So let's dive into it, and I'll give my thoughts.
I'll speak for myself. I never thought that I would be offering an apology to Jeffrey Epstein. I think of all the times I've maligned that guy, all the times I've accused him of crimes, of blackmailing people, of trafficking children to powerful figures around the world on behalf of global intel services. And then I learned yesterday from Attorney General Pam Bondi, that's totally untrue.
Yes, yeah.
The guy killed himself after 36 days in prison for no reason. He was a billionaire. Mm-hmm. He had no clients. He'd done nothing wrong other than get like naughty massages 20 years before. And the guy killed himself, another pointless death. And then his best friend, former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, doing 20 years in prison for no crime. There are no victims.
Yes, it's a victimless crime. They're obviously persecuted by the state.
Yes.
They're political prisoners, really. It's The Hague should come in and do an investigation, or we're watching one of the most systematic government cover-ups of all time. Something that you say that always resonates with me is I don't want to be lied to, and I specifically don't want to be lied to by the very people who built careers, and I'm talking here specifically about Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and many others who now work for the administration, who fed MAGA and the American people and promised them to get to the bottom of this, only to turn their tune immediately upon assuming office, lying before Congress, talking about this is an obvious case of suicide, going on the Joe Rogan podcast, and effectively asking for some level of trust that I don't give to any government official. FBI Director Kash Patel said, if I had this information, don't you think I would release it? No, I don't, because actually your actions now just in the last couple of days only vindicate the idea that this is not only a systematic government cover-up at the highest levels, not only involving sex trafficking, but going all the way up to the top levels of the U.S. intelligence, the Israeli intelligence community, implicating powerful people, billionaires here in the United States, former prime ministers of Israel, our current president, former presidents of the United States, and for them to come out on the very day, or I guess the day before, that the Israeli prime minister is visiting Washington
for the third time
this.
And just my first point on it, it is so awful. Exactly what he's saying. It is so awful for the administration in general, because if you were to watch, and I think a lot of it has been surfacing recently, but if you were to watch some of the videos of Dan Bongino and Kash Patel before getting appointed, they were hawks for releasing the Epstein and calling it out, and they made tons of money off of it. And then for them to go in and say, oh yeah, no, there's nothing in there. It's so funny because in the videos where you see them saying it, where they were interviewed, I called it out in my previous video, but it looks like a hostage negotiation situation, or a hostage capture situation where they're being held at gunpoint and being told, you must say this. And it's the problem is they very well could be, and that's the problem, is we don't know, because although I focused on it, it implicates Donald Trump, it also implicates our CIA basically and other intelligence organizations, which Sagar is mentioning here with Israel, and so. The issue is they're, in my mind, as I'm looking at it, is they're both young guys, and this will actually be a point that I'll come back to later when I talk about Donald Trump, but they're both young guys that probably have a lot to lose, and so, they can talk a big game before they get in, but then when they're actually in it and they have something to lose, i.e., shadow part of the CIA, because they're both they're at the heads of the organization. Like, they shouldn't you would think, be afraid of anyone. But I think this just proves, or what's going on essentially just proves that no, actually, even they are afraid of something that is bigger, that is out there. Because I cannot imagine that they are afraid of losing the job as much as they are losing their lives. That would be a much bigger threat. And I think who they're messing with, or who they would be messing with in coming clean and telling the truth of what actually happened, it just doesn't add up really. And the other thing too that I'll say further, doubling down on Sagar's point here, is if you watched Kash Patel on Joe Rogan, it was the most uncomfortable exchange ever, where he basically is like, and I think he got caught off guard because it was right when Elon went full nuclear on Trump, saying that he was implicated in all the files. And so when he was on there, he got called out because it was happening while they were recording it. And then he just it was just a super uncomfortable exchange where he was like, "Don't you think I would bring it forward if I had the information?" And he just kept repeating it, and there was no real evidence offered up. It was like the dumbest exchange that you could come up with, or response that you could come up with, if you were caught completely off guard. There was no, I haven't seen it. There was no real excuse offered, or out offered. It was just, "Don't you think I would do it if I had the information?" And that's not a particularly compelling argument to me.
Year. Why exactly? Can we go over that? Last time I checked, this is a country do about $52 billion in bilateral trade with, equivocal to like Singapore and Chile. I don't remember the last time the Chilean or Singaporean leaders were in Washington for 3 times in the last 6 months, and to who we give $3.3 billion to. Switzerland. These are all countries I love, by the way. I visited all 3 that I just listed. I love them. Would they serve?
And Israel. I
Yes.
think did you go to school in Israel?
That's right. I did 6 weeks in Israel. It's a great country. I like it a lot, but it's not about that. This is about my country. And so watching this all just get perverted and then used and hijacking our government is just particularly offensive to me. Not only just...
And another point that I'll make is that Ghislaine Maxwell, who Jeffrey Epstein was connected with and who was basically going out supposedly and finding these girls and bringing them in and all that kind of stuff, her father was attached to Israeli intelligence as well, so the Mossad. So just again, further backstory, if you're not aware, that's why there are additional, even if you're trying to pass off, okay, well maybe not, that's where the ties are, where it's like, okay, that's one of the reasons. There are multiple reasons, but that's one of the reasons why Sagar is saying, being able to tie in what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, i.e., basically compromising people with underage girls, and then using that as blackmail against them. That's what the Mossad connection is, and that's what the Israel connection is. So just a little bit more background on that if you weren't aware of that situation. That's why there's a very strong connection, that it probably has to do with Israel, and then he's tying in, obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu coming into the U.S. multiple times, and and I think also this ties into other things going on, like us constantly supporting Israel when they're bombing Gaza, when they're starting wars in Iran, all these different situations that we find ourselves in, why we might be doing those things as well. Because we could be, our leaders could be compromised by them, and they could let it out, and so again, it's very unclear. The understanding is that, or the thought is that Epstein was basically CIA and Mossad tied into both of those groups. So that's kind of where we are, and that's why he's bringing up Israel here. And again, it makes more sense. It's lines on a graph, right, where you're saying, okay, why are we supporting them constantly? Why are we? And I think the other part of it too is just military industrial complex in general, where we just want to have an ally in the region where they're going to allow us to launch missions out from bases in their area. So again, all those things combined, it's just something that's interesting to think about.
As an American, but I feel particularly not only deceived by the people like the FBI director and the deputy director, Dan Bongino, but the attorney general who went on camera after assuming her office on the White House lawn. These are supposed to mean things, and said thousands of victims. We have the client list. We have the flight logs. She held a little press conference, whatever event with so-called influencers in which she gave them the Epstein files, an infamous photo that was released. It turned out that binder actually had redacted information in it, which was already public, just to demonstrate how they were turning they're turning the White House effectively into a performative show and
just to clarify on that point that he's bringing up, not only did those binders have redacted information in them, right? Stuff that was already public, it was actually further redacted. So there was the original redactions. Those are out in the public. You can find those now. Those exist. They're out in the ether. They're on the internet. And then the binders that they got had additional redactions. So stuff that was already public, that was out and known, was redacted in those binders. So those binders were actually less useful than what was even out there to begin with before they were given the binders. So that's why it's such a joke that they even did that, and they basically humiliated all of these right-wing influencers that they had given these binders to with the Epstein files in them, because it was they could have printed a better version off of online and created their own binder.
Making light of the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of underage victims. And it's just not the victims, it's the fact that it extends to the highest levels of the elite, the transatlantic elite, and possibly even beyond that, from some of the richest men in our country, presidents of the United States, former prime ministers of Israel. We're talking here about Bill Gates, Leon Black, Leslie Wexner, the richest and most powerful people in the world, the Nobel Committee, the scientific, the community, Harvard, MIT, the tentacles through which this operation had its hands in and stretches all the way back to the 1980s. It is one of the most disgusting intelligence operations, I think, in United States intelligence history, rivaling some of the things, eventually that led to the death of President Kennedy. And the thing is around this time, is just like Kennedy, we all know the truth. We know that this document released by the Trump administration is complete bullshit. And I guess that maybe, just like with the Kennedy assassination, they expect us to just get over it in a period of time. And I genuinely think it's incumbent on anybody who was either supportive of the president, any United States citizen, to say no. We demand absolute and total transparency on this case, and particularly.
And the issue is, so there's two ways that I could see it going. The first is, I think things for the average person are getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And at a certain point, this could be that straw that breaks the camel's back, where this is just too much. This is the final straw. People are finally not only are you not doing the things that you told us you were going to do, right? There's so many things that Trump has said he was going to do that he hasn't done, or he hasn't done correctly, or look at the tariffs where he's putting them on and taking them off and putting them on again and taking them off probably, and it's just back and forth and back and forth. Or the immigration, where it was we're going to deport everyone is what they said, and then they're going to go after just the criminals, and then they start then they do that for a while, and then it kind of slows down to a trickle, and then they go after people at Home Depot, and then they start actually going after what I think Trump had said in the beginning was he was going to do is mass deport everyone. Then he comes out and says, oh, no, we need to leave certain industries like hotels, which he runs hotels, so that's kind of unfair. Agriculture, which is okay, I guess I get it. But again, he's just back and forth with all of these policies. There's no consistency. The people are not getting what they want. And this could be just that last straw. No wars, right? He ran on that. He was saying, oh, the war will be done on day one for Ukraine and Russia. Well, now we're shipping Ukraine more weapons again. Like, what is going on here? This is not what we wanted. Israel continues to bomb Gaza. Israel then starts a fight with Iran. Like, it's literally one thing after another that Trump said that he wasn't going to do that he's doing. So I could, again, see this as kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And the thing that I think, the only reason why I think that it could happen is because of conversations like this. With the, mainstream media, or the traditional media, I guess I'll call it, going out and basically kicking Tucker Carlson out and him becoming bigger than he ever even was on Fox, with like Sagar and Breaking Points and all these essentially just, I'll call them influencers or not talking heads, right? Because I feel like that's kind of a diminishing term. But with all the people out there who are, Megyn Kelly, all these people who should be aligned with, or are aligned with the Republican Party and Trump, they're all, it seems to me, I've seen many of them talk about this, they're all completely, pissed off about what's going on with the Epstein files and with what has been said. And so I think they're turning up the temperature on that, and it has caused a firestorm unlike what would have happened 5 years ago. So again, for this to come out and this to start happening and, all these things to start, boiling to the surface, and I don't think the temperature is getting turned down on this like everything else. I think this stays in the news cycle for probably quite a bit more time than previous things that, most of the time it's just water off a duck's back for Trump. And it's just on to the next thing, just pretend like it's not even that big of a deal. But I think this one will have much more sticking power. And the other way that I could see it going is that, because I've seen so many times in the past where something happens, like Jeffrey Epstein killing himself, suiciding, which could be possible. I'm kind of in the camp that probably not likely based on how the government was acting last time it happened. But you think about it and you go, okay, well, if you think back to what happened with it, everyone was like, this is insanely fishy. What the heck is going on? Everyone got pissed off about it. And then really what happened was memes just were made about it. There are tons of memes going around, flying around, but no one was really held to account. And again, I really hope that's not the way it goes, but I could very well see that happening because us as American citizens, in my opinion, have very little recourse to be able to hold anyone accountable. And again, the only reason why I think it might go the other way is because people like this, conversations like this are happening, and so it might be possible that stuff actually, the temperature is just turned up too high, people keep talking about it, we won't let it go, and so something actually gets done. But that is hopeful, and if I had to assign a percentage, I would say 30% that happens. But again, much more, that is a much higher percentage than what I would have said 5 years ago, where I would say it's like 5%. 5% anything happens, 95% chance nothing's going to happen. So I do think it is a more seismic shift towards that direction, but it's still hopeful that I would think anything would happen. I think it's still unlikely, unfortunately.
Of these government officials, do not use your platform to enrich yourself on these podcast platforms and constantly talk about Epstein and the Epstein files, eventually assume office, change on a dime, and expect us to trust you. That is not how this works. No. And in particular, in that document, I think it's one of the most disgusting documents ever released by the United States government, because it said there was no blackmail, we're not releasing this information. Kash Patel has this new line about how we're not going to re-victimize women. Ask...
The insane thing about that is, if it's not cover up, then why did Epstein, why did Epstein have a picture of Bill in a dress in his, whatever, his mansion or whatever it was. Why did he have that? Like, of course that's literally me saying, I got you and I can do whatever I want to you, and you have to listen to me. You have to do what I say because I have you essentially by the cojones, right? You're not going to get away with it. This is, so for them to say there's no blackmail, why were there so many videos of it? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And there was, it was reported that it would literally be like this person with this person. So like, perpetrator of the action, like who the implicated party, victim, I will call them victim, but it would be like the girl, and then the date. And so literally all of these CDs or hard drives or whatever, they would all have that kind of nomenclature on them. So to say that it's not blackmail is completely laughable. Yeah, that is one of the wildest claims. And then, like he's saying that, and this was part of the Joe Rogan interview where he first threw that out there, but where he's saying, oh yeah, we don't want to re-victimize. And the whole thing with that is like, we don't even, like, it's not re-victimizing. It's literally someone in a back room watches it, they figure out who's implicated, and you just go round those people up. Like, I think the victims, the girls who are being trafficked, the victims, would rather that these people are held accountable. I think that was why they went after, what was it, Prince Andrew in Europe. Like, that's why they went after him. I think it was him. My apologies if not. But that's why they went after these parties, and they were trying to sue him and extradite him into the U.S., and then they just kind of gave up on it very quickly. But that's exactly why they were trying to go after those people to begin with. So to say, like, we don't want to re-victimize them, that is completely insane. That is the dumbest argument that, again, I think Kash Patel came up with on the spot because he was getting pressed by Joe Rogan, and it was just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, we don't want to re-victimize them. Okay.
The Epstein victims themselves, they have been begging for this information to come to light, specifically to implicate the powerful men that victimized them and through which they were, they were basically used for trafficking purposes to ensnare them in this high-level U.S. intelligence, Israeli intelligence operation, probably run in conjunction. And the trail of this entire thing it enrages me. It actually enrages me as an American.
I don't think you're alone. And I do think, as someone who voted for the president, campaigned for the president a lot, I'm not attacking the president, but I think even people who are fully on board with, the bulk of the MAGA agenda are like, this is too much, actually.
Yes.
I'm saying that with love, and I hope that they're listening, because I think this threatens to blow up the whole thing. But let's just back up a little bit and just pick at some of the inconsistencies here. So you're saying that Pam Bondi said on camera, we have a client list.
On the White House lawn.
I've seen the client list.
Yes.
And then yesterday, she's saying there's no client list.
There's no client list. And there was no systematic blackmail. That actually might be the most preposterous line in the document.
But it doesn't make any sense. So they've said that there were thousands of young people.
And if you haven't heard, I think it might have came out after this, but then she was asked about it, and there was like a weird, where she was sitting with Trump and a bunch of other people. And she basically was like, oh no, her claim was that, oh no, I was talking about all of the documents, including, if you remember, because Trump was saying, we're going to release RFK, JFK, Martin Luther King, like all these other things, we're going to release all of these. So she was saying she had all of those. That's what she was referencing. But if you watch the actual Fox News clip where she was asked about the client list, it sounds like she's referring to the singular, the client list. But now she's trying to backtrack and say all the files related to Epstein, and there's so many to review, and this, that, and the other, and So again, it's a pretty epic backtrack that she's making here, and it's very unbelievable, I would say.
In some cases, minors, underage children, sexually victimized. Are they saying that Epstein single-handedly had sex with all? Because actually, for whatever it's worth, I don't think anyone that I've never seen anyone make the claim that Epstein had sex with anybody.
Yes, that's right. Well, a lot of these allegations revolve around like
that. I'm not entirely sure about. I had watched something on the whole Ghislaine and Jeffrey. I think it was a documentary, which was a few years ago. But there was one part in that where essentially when she would get, try and ease the girls into, here's some of the things that you'll have to do, right? They basically put them up and were like, here's this lifestyle that you get to live. You get to fly around on a private jet. You get to go to all these tropical, locations and destinations and this, that, and the other. And then one of the things that Ghislaine would do is she would basically be like, oh, Jeffrey has a very large sexual appetite. And then, they would make them give him massages and stuff like that. So Tucker Carlson's point here, I'm not sure that I would agree with, because I think I had seen something, and again, it was in a documentary a couple of years ago, but I'm pretty sure that they were stating that they were having the girls essentially end up servicing him as well. But I could be incorrect, but that was what I thought I remembered on it.
Group activities, right. And they were around like masseuse and being, look, the way that Dershowitz and others would claim it is I kept my underwear on and it was all a, very above the board massage information. There's that famous photo of Bill Clinton in the airport terminal with one of these young victims who herself says she was a victim of the Epstein entire machine. So you're exactly right. It's like for these thousands of women, were they victimized entirely by Ghislaine Maxwell and by Jeffrey Epstein? Because by the way, that's not even what the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein court documents and other things that we already knew that were in the public information. That's not what they say. That's not what the testimony of the victims of these people say. And so, again, even this client list thing, I do think people can go down the rabbit hole too much and think that there is, as you know, there's no ledger as right, in exactly. Had sex exactly. with so-and-so and we, because of that supported Israel. Like, that's not how it works.
So the term client list itself is misleading, you're saying.
And that's the thing, though, is like, yes, it's not going to have it, so it they might. They might just have a list of all of it so that they can ship it back to Mossad or CIA or whoever as just like a searchable index, right? Maybe they have an Excel file of like every single person who's ever, because if it goes all the way back to the 80s, like, yes, who you're targeting, right? But if it's so large and so pervasive, and that's why nothing's happening on it, and the only people talking out about it are people who are not implicated in it directly, like, if there are that many people implicated in it, then yes, absolutely. I think there could actually be a list where it's like, okay, what do we have on each person, or how many times did they visit, and who did they do stuff with, and whatever. But going back to the point that I originally made is that they have all the videos and everything. So you could go in and be like, oh yes, here are the videos with these people. So like, you don't need a list that directly says, okay, this person did this with this person, and you don't need a list of it, but you have videos and you can say, okay, who are in these videos, so you could create a list out of it fairly simply.
It's misleading because really what we want is a full list of the victims, of the people who flew on the flight logs. But the most important is the money. And I think a lot of people actually miss that in the Epstein story. Jeffrey Epstein came to power largely because he worked at Bear Stearns and effectively was like a high finance money laundering expert. That's effectively what we can learn from his background. That's how he came involved with Leon Black. Leon Black was one of the most powerful men in New York. This is the head of the Apollo Group. He paid him $170 million through various shell corporations for tax advice. And when he was caught doing that, he was said, actually, it wasn't even useful because all the tax advice was actually in the public domain. So what? Leslie Wexner in the 1991, I believe, signed full power of attorney over to Jeffrey Epstein. He was one of the richest men in America. I think he was the richest man in Ohio at that time. Jeffrey Epstein becomes the head of the Wexner Foundation, funnels.
And what that says to me is they were, operating before, and these are some of the first people ensnared in operation. And they basically say, either you do this or we're going to expose you and basically destroy your life. And the thing that's kind of crazy to me now is like how old these people are, and why don't they just come out and be like, yeah, it happened. Like, round them up. I'll blow the whistle on it. Like, this is exactly what's going down. And that's kind of the same thing that I was thinking about with Trump, where it's like, you know, part of me was, especially when he almost got assassinated, it's he would basically say, I've had it, I'm going to blow it all out of the water. You know, here's what's going on, and I'm going to actually dig in and destroy the deep state and this, that, and the other. But apparently he, you know, loves what life he has left too much to actually do that. Because, again, I think he would get taken down as well. Not assassinate. I mean, it could be assassinate, take it down, right? Because it's either he's directly implicated in this and he would go down, or he would get assassinated from it. And or he's been threatened by it, right? Because there were 2 attempts on him already. So again, I think it could be one or the other. Because of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, I lean much more towards he's implicated, he's had relations with minors. That's in my opinion the direction that these actions would lead me to.
$2.5 million to Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister. I'm putting these things out there because I want people to know that the money is an integral part of the operation, and to the extent that the sex trafficking and all of that is linked, they are fused together because they were used primarily by the intelligence community. Both Epstein was a conduit of high stakes money laundering for things like, you know, not Iran-Contra specifically, but let's say like funneling arms from Israel to Iran. This was also how he met eventually Robert Maxwell and became ensnared with his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell. The money laundering is actually more key to his intelligence rules.
From Israel to Iran?
Well, this was a key part of the Maxwell story. Robert Maxwell is a very sketchy character, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. People focus on the tabloid. That's actually not all what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the fact that he's this Czechoslovakian Orthodox Jew who like escapes from the Nazis. He eventually becomes a highly decorated soldier. Actually, I think he won the second highest medal in the UK for his operations during World War II. From that point forward, becomes very, very enmeshed with the Zionist community inside of the UK and propping up the newly formed state of Israel. From that point forward, he basically serves as a high stakes, like almost an entity in and of itself. That's the way that Daryl Cooper has described him, is like a sovereign wealth fund almost, which with together brokers all kinds of cutout deals, between Israel and Iran. And actually, Epstein himself, when he was just 28 years old, flew on a private jet, I believe, to the Pentagon with somebody who we know is directly linked to these, previous intelligence operations and funneling money and weapons into many of these conflicts. So this stretches back decades, and that's a very, very important part of the story. So please just do not tell me that there's no part of a systematic blackmail campaign. It's so preposterous, and it actually just makes me want to tear my hair out.
I remember thinking when Epstein killed himself, I never met Epstein, but I mean, he, knew everybody. I mean, I will say, in his, in the defense of people who got caught up in this because they went to dinner at Epstein's, like that George Stephanopoulos, for example, who I disagree with on everything, but like, I know George, and I don't think George is having sex with kids at Epstein's. Yeah. Like Epstein was, just part of like the social fabric, right? And Trump knew him for that reason also. But when he killed himself, I remember thinking people were like, he didn't kill himself. I was like, he probably killed himself. He's in jail, whatever. His brother Mark called me a couple days after he killed himself. And so began this like 3-year-long conversation with Mark Epstein and looking into it in a way I never thought I would. He didn't kill himself. Yeah. He was murdered in his cell.
Yeah.
And I think that's really meaningful. It's the most secure federal lockup in the United States. How can that happen? It can't happen without state actors involved. Okay?
That's right. Look at the story that we were...
Yeah, that's kind of why I lean more towards that. Again, I could see a world where he did kill himself, right? Because he pissed off a bunch of people, very powerful. If he decided to talk, basically, he could spill it on all of them, both sides of the aisle. Obviously, Donald Trump at the time, right? But then also Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, a ton of very powerful people. So there could be a world in which he realizes that, and then he goes, well, I'm going to die anyway. I may as well go out on my own terms. But I'm more inclined to go the route that Tucker thinks here, because he has gotten multiple times, has gotten off in the past, and then nothing came of it. Famously, he was arrested before, and then they were told, the people that had him were told he's intelligence and you need to release him. And so I would be more inclined to think, although this kind of blew up a little bit larger, right? I think that the light was shined on it a little bit brighter than it had been in the past, but I don't think there's any reason that he wouldn't have thought that he was just going to get out again and, get it swept under the rug and no one's paying attention. But with the news media and, as it has been progressing, I think that is would have been a foolish assumption for him to make. And so 100%, that's where I'm much more on the side of, he was, he did not kill himself, he was killed. And so that, again, that's the way I would look at it. But again, I could see a world where, yes, he did commit suicide.
Told at that time, part of the information dump here by the administration is some hours of footage. We were told that footage didn't exist. We were told that this was some guards who were, off. I think they
fell
were on
asleep.
duty. They fell asleep. None of it exists, and actually, it was all part of a screw up, and the camera angles wouldn't even be able to show anything. But that's why they're relatively confident. So where did this camera footage even come from?
Well, the camera footage doesn't even. First of all, it ends before they take his body out. Right. Why can't we see that?
Yep.
And the angle on it is absurd. Yeah. But the real question, just not to be pedantic, but the real question is, who are the other inmates on that cell block? So no one came in or out of the cell block. I think that's fair. It was the most secure cell block in that federal lockup in Manhattan. But who are the other inmates? And I went to Department of Prisons, which is part of DOJ, and asked, what are their names? Oh, we can't for privacy reasons. Really? These are people who can't vote or own a firearm?
Yes.
For the rest of their lives? But somehow they've got a HIPAA law or something around who's a federal inmate? Fuck you, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry. It made me so mad.
And the funny thing about him asking that, his supposed cellmate, so the person he was sharing a cell with, if you haven't seen him, you can look him up, just Jeffrey Epstein cellmate. Huge guy, gigantic, muscles, so he used to be a police officer, I believe, and he was implicated in selling IDs or something, basically doing some underhanded stuff. So he was away for that. And so it's okay, what's the incentive to him doing that? I wonder if he's free and walking around right now. That would be interesting to look up. But yeah, if you're someone who believes in his country and is huge and physically capable of strangling another man easily, well, guess what? That was his cellmate. So again, just the claims here are so transparent, and it's so sad, and that's why no one can believe what the lies that were basically being fed about this topic.
Because, of course, if Epstein was murdered, and it's very clear that he was murdered by another inmate.
That's right.
And we know that a bunch of them were transferred out of that unit right after he died. Who were they? Where are they now? Mm-hmm. Why can't we get an answer to that question? So the whole thing that this tape shows...
Yeah, and I don't even think he meant it this way, but are any of them free now? Are any of them walking around? Let's see if there's any overlap there. That could be interesting.
He didn't kill himself. It's like a joke. But worse than that, it's a joke that we all get. They're not fooling anybody. So I feel like we're at a dangerous point now.
Yeah, I agree, because the lie is more the lie at this point is not even part of trying to convince any of this is true.
Yes.
The lie is a signal to everybody else involved in the scheme that to the ultimate ends, the United States government will go to protect all of you.
Yes.
And that's for
Man,
what
is that smart.
purpose?
Can you say that again? Okay,
yes.
So it's a signal.
The lie is not for you and me. The lie is for those implicated to say, no matter what, we will protect you. And then we have to start asking the question, why? As in, what is the purpose of this entire thing? Why does it matter that it happens right before the Israeli prime minister comes to Washington for the third time? As you said, what is the linkage here between those two? And the linkage is the fact that even a surface level view of Jeffrey Epstein, of the case, of the entire public record, reveals Alex Acosta, who said he belonged to intelligence. He said that. The person who was responsible for the Sweetheart 13-month deal. Alex Acosta, who is the U.S. attorney, said, and I believe he testified this in sworn testimony, said, I was told he belonged to intelligence. That was a key part of why the charges were dropped against him. And, he got some Sweetheart Palm Beach County Jail situation where he was allowed to leave on the weekends. And why, even though I know you'll forgive George, but I actually won't. I don't have dinner with pedophiles. I'm not sure about you. I'm generally aware of the people who I am around. And if I can get invited to someone's house, I do cursory Google searches. That's generally what, I think that's normal.
Smart.
I don't want to be in the presence of people who I think are like genuinely evil. That's what I think. So for me, I actually can't forgive many of the media figures.
And the other thing I'll call out about that too is, especially after that first 13-month jail time, especially after that, it's out there in the open. It's known that this is who he is. This is what he does, although, maybe not to the highest levels. But if you see someone with criminal activity on there, especially if you're an important person, you probably shouldn't be going over there for dinner. So I 100% agree with Sagar, and that's kind of the whole thing with Trump and with all these other people that I've mentioned, is that they, if any of them, especially after the first time, had anything to do with him, they basically have no excuse. And that's why I say both sides are implicated, and that is going to play a big role in the point that I'm essentially probably going to be making later.
And the presidents, people like Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, all these other high-profile figures, specifically because it was all out in the public record. And then in particular, all of these high-flying Wall Street financiers and Deutsche Bank, remember, they were fined. I think it was the New York Financial Services. I read that entire report. It's one of the most extraordinary reports I've ever seen, because they specifically talk about how the bank ignored almost every single one of its own procedures that it would apply to any other client, and that at the highest levels, and remember, I think is the Barclays CEO, he's already been in trouble for this, for covering up much of this in one of the largest financial institutions in the entire world. For example, Tucker, if you and I keep going to the bank and withdrawing $9,900 in cash, and we do it for a couple of weeks, our banking institutions are supposed to call, both the IRS and the DOJ and say something is going on here.
And they will,
and they should, right? That is what this is done for a reason. He did this for years, and the classification that the bank accepted was it was just for tips. This is what I mean about the highest level of the cover-up and what the cover-up means for the system itself. And something you and I were talking about recently is I really believe here that, and I've never believed it more, that in a sense, for elected government and for all the benefits of our republic and of representation, that elites actually have always mattered. And of course, they're the ones responsible for channeling public energy. This is the way that we're set up into law, into policy, etc. And so this lie was a signal to the elites. It was a signal to Versailles. It was a signal to the court that the court will always be protected no matter what. And it's enraging at a moment when the court has never been more reviled by the public. It's not just a spit in the face of the public. It really is like a late 1700s kind of signal to the court that we will protect this institution no matter what. And it's really a question for the rest of us as to if we're going to continue to put up with this.
I wonder what our recourse is. And can I say one thing that I was brooding about this morning? When the Epstein thing first...
And to what Tucker was asking there about what our recourse is, that is exactly 100% it. Because the problem is, what option do we actually have? Again, it's very helpful that there are people out there who have audiences who are able to call this, and that Trump watches, right? For sure, Trump is aware of what Tucker Carlson says. He's it's either because other people ask him directly, or it becomes such news that it appears on other things he watches, or he watches it directly, or to some level, right? He is not able to escape the narratives that are coming from Tucker here. So, again, for what it's worth, that puts a little bit more energy into the movement, but it's still a long shot, and to the average person, it's not going to make a difference at all, which is, I think, upsetting. And again, who knows if that becomes the straw that breaks the camel's back, but I feel like a lot of people are pretty fed up with this, and I think it completely destroys the trust between that and COVID and all the COVID lies. I would not be surprised, or I would not be shocked if any person was like, I just completely don't believe anything the government says to me from now until the time that I pass away. Because there are just so many things where the government obviously does not have our best interests at heart, and doesn't actually care about the population. They just care about, to the point that's being made here, protecting themselves, which I don't know. That makes me, that makes me trust them just so much less.
Happened when he died, and I'll plead ignorance and lack of interest. I was like distracted. There's lots of stuff going on. I get a call from someone I know, who I like, who's a true hardcore neocon, many of whom I liked personally, who's writing a book on Epstein. Two people I knew together wrote this book on Epstein. I don't want to name them. I don't want to be mean or anything. But they're like, can we come on your show? We've written a book on Epstein and this whole scandal. So I read the book, and it's very sophisticated. And it's like Epstein's super bad, but the Epstein story is really limited to Epstein, this bad guy who died. And there's no evidence it was part of anything bigger that had anything to do with other countries. And they come on my show and I interview them, and they're like, no, yeah, there's all this stuff, mysteries. We couldn't get to the bottom of it. But, Epstein's really, really bad. And looking back, I'm like, that was by design.
Yes.
Right? It was like, wow, we're exposed here. And we need to, we need a Warren Commission, actually.
No, you're right. Yeah. Except a real one at this time.
It didn't work because, Vanity Fair, to its great credit, wrote a couple of pieces, then they stopped covering it, I noticed. But they kind of got to the Wexner thing. Who's this Wexner guy?
Who
what
is
this?
Wexner?
And what ties do these guys have to foreign intel services?
Yes.
Which were deep. I mean, I think Ehud Barak lived at Jeffrey Epstein's place off Fifth Avenue.
He flew on his plane 30 times, lived often at his townhouse in Manhattan.
Yes.
At one time, the largest residence in the history of New York City, transferred to him by deed by Leslie Wexner. For what purpose? We have no idea. He invested in Ehud Barak's defense intelligence startup, and I think the defense intelligence...
Because he got caught.
Part there, maybe even as interesting as the fact that it's a former Israeli prime minister and former head of Israeli military intelligence. I mean, this is what I'm saying about the money. The money is so important to the story because we already have, documented cases of CIA, Israeli, and others buying up private corporations which pose as, let's say, cybersecurity firms that sell to the government or other governments and use those as backdoors. So, look, if you're Ehud Barak, you've probably met, some of the richest people on the planet. Why do you need, these investments from Jeffrey Epstein, of all people, a tax advisor to the super rich? What did Bill Gates get from his repeated involvement with Jeffrey Epstein? Why did Melinda Gates, divorce Bill Gates after years and of obvious knowledge of his philandering in the past? Are we really to believe it's about philandering, from 20 years ago, which was well known apparently within Microsoft? No, it's because she probably started to get a little aware, or perhaps there was something else going on there as to the extent of what that relationship was. And, the fact is even from public reporting, we're told that Jeffrey Epstein was seen by Gates as the conduit to win the Nobel Peace Prize. How? For what purpose? How does he have all of these ends with the highest level of the intelligence or the scientific community? And then, of course, it doesn't take a genius to see the intertwinement between the scientific community, the academic research industrial complex, and the intelligence community. So all of these pieces, this is the unfortunate part. And, even
because they're implicated.
Returning, like you said, to him being killed himself, or him allegedly killing himself. Let's not forget Michael Baden, who I think is a very authoritative figure. He reviewed all of the documents, the autopsy, etc. He said this is not a case of suicide.
I've talked to him about it.
Yes, and it's like, let's remember. He's one of the most, probably the most famous forensic,
pathologist.
Pathologist in America, and his research has been or his, diagnosis has been very important in a lot of other previous cases, which turned out to be true. And so when he looks at this and we have that evidence, when we have the cover up here now at the government, I'm appalled, that this is happening at the highest level. But my only conclusion is just it's just a signal to the court is don't worry about it. We've got you. The people don't matter in this case.
Man, I think this, for a bunch of reasons, it's so obvious. It is salacious. People have followed it for years. The president promised to reveal the truth about this. Pam Bondi, as you said, went on television, said we have the truth and we're going to give it to you.
Yes.
Here's one thing that I'm kind of curious about is what if they literally didn't do any of this stuff and just kind of let it slide? Like if they didn't mention anything and they just kind of let it like fade off into the distance and never talked about it again. I wonder if people would be this upset about it now. Like if they just, they didn't claim that nothing happened. They didn't release the binders to the influencers. They didn't, no one spoke about it. They just kind of, we're looking into it. And they just continued to look into it for the next 3.5 years. That kind of, and then by the next administration, so many things have happened that no one cares anymore. I do truly wonder if anything would have come of it if they just played it that way instead of being as confrontational and handling it the way that they have.
I think this is a big deal. It's a really big deal. It's bigger. So. I hope so too, actually. So let's just assess this logically. They're covering up the DOJ. The current DOJ under Pam Bondi is covering up crimes, very serious crimes by their own description. Mm-hmm. Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
So there are really only two potential explanations that I can think of. Maybe you've got another. The first is that Trump is involved, that, Trump is on the list, that they've got tape of Trump doing something awful. I don't believe that for two reasons. One, I've talked to Trump about it a lot. And I know him. He's not that, for whatever his sins. Mm. I don't think he's that guy, actually. I don't think he likes creepy sex stuff. That's just my view. But more, I think, convincing is that this is all information that the Biden administration had. And if there was evidence that Trump had been involved in illegal sexual activity, you think the people who made up Russiagate wouldn't have leaked it?
Right.
Come on now.
Unless their side is implicated as well. You think they really want, let's say definitely Bill Clinton. You think they want to cross Hillary Clinton, which those two, or some, conglomeration of the two, one or both of them, are very well known to assassinate people that they have problems with. So that's number one. They don't want to implicate them because everyone, Bill Clinton is seen as a figure that everyone loves. So of course they don't want to drag his name through the mud. Plus, who else is in? Is Chuck Schumer? Is probably not Nancy Pelosi, right? Because whatever. Is Nancy Pelosi's husband is there are all these people that are Democrat leadership that could be implicated in this, and that's the thing. In that is that. If it's basically shooting yourself in the foot, right? Like, I'm going to go after Trump, but then I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. And or the points that I've made before, I'm also going to piss off the intelligence. And, by the way, then they're going to be coming after me to assassinate me. So that could be it too, in that, by shining the light on Trump and exposing him for what he has done, well, now you're also saying that basically the CIA is basically propagated pedophilia to compromise people so that they could blackmail them. I mean, that if you're calling that out, like, how insane does that sound? And how insane, not insane as in unrealistic, but insane as in, I think the entire American public would all lose their collective minds and say, we need to destroy this entire agency now, if that came out and that's what was happening. I think if there was proof of that, so very highly incentivized to not bring up Trump in this instance. And so that's the thing now, is that there's a through line with all of this. And so it's not just, there's, again, multiple reasons why they couldn't do it at that time. And the other thing, too, is whoever was in charge is probably even more entrenched at the time, is more entrenched than who's in there now. And even now, they're not willing to actually tell us what happened, in my opinion. And so that's the thing. And as far as Trump, like, watch my other video. The fact that Trump, why did he own Miss America and Miss Teen USA if he wasn't a creep? Like, what are we talking about here, man? Like, that he is creepy. He had the grab him by the pussy thing, which again you could chalk up to locker room talk, but let's be realistic here. The guy is creepy up and down. It's again, it's not surprising to me that he is included in these. What's going on. That they did catch him. They do have a video of him with someone who is underage, whether he knew it or not. And so again, for me, that's not too far out of the realm of possibilities. And again, the second point is, if your side is implicated too, so you can't come out and call out Trump, especially when the whole thing with Epstein has happened. And now I think people would raise an eyebrow and say, well, how did you find this out? Oh, well, look, this just happened. They're going to question, how did you come up with this information? Well, look, the Jeffrey Epstein thing just happened. And so we know that in this instance, you have information on here, so you must have information on other people. It can't just be leaked out onesie twosie now, right? It can't be leaked out one person at a time. Now, if you have information on it, well, now you have to release it all. And so, and then again, that ties back into the implication, and then that ties into everyone would essentially call for the CIA to be disbanded. And really the only person, I think, that actually, and this goes back to Sagar's questions originally, and how he's questioning with Bibi, is then that goes to the only person who has all the cards and can, hey, I'm going to make this public, is Benjamin Netanyahu / the Mossad / the Israeli government. Those are literally the only people who actually hold all the cards and are able to essentially blackmail whoever they want, more or less. So yeah, I don't think anyone. Again, these are two incredibly poor points from Tucker. I think he feels he probably, I don't know if he actually believes them or not. I feel like he probably just feels like he has to go along with them, because otherwise you're going to call out Trump, and then Trump's going to go scorched earth on you. He's still the head of the party. He's still, it's kind of sad. Even in my personal friends and whatever, when I post these videos on social media, I will have people who stand up for him, and it's like, I mean, at this point, how can you not think that he's doing these things? And I get it, right? Guilty until proven otherwise. But I mean, the amount of evidence is just like, I can't imagine. I think every single person now, especially now after what has happened in the last week, every single person now should 100% be like, yeah, he did it. But it's just, it's a cult of personality. No one wants to believe he's doing such things because we love him, because he owns the libs and whatever. But yeah, it's not good. None of it's good. And I think, again, with what's happened the last week, I don't know how anyone can say that he's not directly implicated.
So the only other explanation that I can think of, again, maybe you've got another, is that intel services are at the very center of this story, U.S. and Israeli, and they're being protected. I think that seems like the most plausible.
That's the most obvious. They have a history of this. There have been multiple documented cases of pedophilia inside of the CIA perpetrated by CIA.
And the other point that I'll make that I think is really interesting is that Trump, even before he was elected, was very squeamish about Epstein. Like when he basically went in and said, okay, there's this, and this. We're gonna do them all day one. We're gonna do RFK. We're gonna do JFK. We're gonna do Martin Luther King. We're gonna release all the files on all these. But then when he was asked about Epstein, he got real squeamish about it. Where he's like, well, they're private people who could be implicated, and so I don't. That one maybe less so. So it's not like he was gung ho for Epstein from the get go. When he was campaigning to be in office, he sheepishly said, "Yeah, we'll see what we can do on it." But he's always been very squeamish about Epstein, which raises a huge red flag for me. Like, if you're so afraid and so like, oh no, I don't know if we're gonna do that one. Why? Because you're implicated or you're afraid of being assassinated by the CIA. And that's kind of the point that I wanted to wrap around as well, is that, again, with him almost being assassinated, I 100% he would have just said, screw you guys, we're gonna go in, we're gonna release everything, I'm gonna gut the agency, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Like, I would think that at his age, I mean, how many years do you think you have left, man? Like, if you're lucky, 20 maybe not even. And what is the quality of those years? If anyone was going to do it, I thought it would be him, but obviously I was proven incredibly wrong. He is either afraid of them or he is afraid of getting in trouble himself because he's implicated, and whatever it is, again, it's deeply disappointing to me, and I think points to him being directly implicated. That's the only way I can really read it at this point in time.
CIA officers documented that in many of those cases, I believe over a dozen cases, this was a BuzzFeed news piece years back, where the CIA specifically did not want to prosecute those individuals in federal court for fear that they would reveal sources and methods if they were pulled into open court, and they basically just made it go away. The only time they actually prosecuted somebody for child pornography was whenever he'd already being prosecuted for mishandling classified information.
Well, when they want to crush you, they put kiddie porn in your computer. It's why I don't have a computer. Don't own one.
Yeah, if you're an important person, you should be careful.
Computer.
Yeah, that's with my whole setup here. I'm very glad I'm not an important person because 100% they can do anything they want. They can load files onto your computer. You can get completely screwed, and that's not to say that there aren't people who do these things and who perpetrate, like the Subway guy, Subway spokesman, Jared Fogle, like there are like people out there doing it, but they also can plan it on there themselves. So for Tucker, it's probably smart, but they could still plan it like on his phone and stuff, and like you're still screwed, man.
In my house.
This is an important thing, though, is that we already have documented cases of them covering this up. I believe the CIA Inspector General, I forget the exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, you wouldn't even believe the amount of child porn, that I've seen while I'm on this job. I mean, these are depraved. Look, I mean, it's a large organization, a small percentage of the U.S., we can make that argument. I think there is like something pathological, kind of in the minds of the people who excel in this type of environment.
Of course, it's based on lying.
Yes.
And lying is the gateway drug to every other sin, of course. And the veil of secrecy that protects CIA up to and including its budget, which we can't know, makes all kinds of really evil behavior possible. In fact, it inspires it.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the cloak of invisibility, would that improve or degrade your behavior?
Yes. Everyone knows.
Serious.
Everyone knows the answer to that.
No, of course, you'd be like, I'm invisible. At some point, you're going to have to go up and go like, like you couldn't.
Well, and they see
doesn't make you a better person.
They see their own colleagues getting away with it, and it's a permission structure. And so, look, I mean, that's a small case, but it just shows.
And the other thing too to remember about these institutions is that, unlike the president and unlike Congress people, and although a lot of them have been there for a long time, there's no turnover for these. I mean, yes, there is a little bit, but like at the very top, right, who's leading the organization, yes, there is some turnover with them, but then everyone beneath them stays the same, pretty much. Right? There could be some turnover when people leave, but that allows people who are the most sinister and the most devious and the most, whatever, to rise to the top and never have to leave. And that's the thing, is then that begets itself as well, much like they're saying here, where you're operating under the guise, and so that makes it more likely that you're doing underhanded things. Well, also, by the way, if you're allowed to be there and you have leadership at the top who is corrupt and evil, well, then it's going to go all the way down. And so, in the past, where we heard about like LSD studies and mind control and midnight climax and all these things that are very real and have been proven, all these people who are at the top greenlighting that, well, they're bringing up people underneath them who are going to be even more more vile and more repugnant, and you're not going to want to basically these are not types of people that you would want to have in your life, because they're willing to do very evil things. And again, it's at the top. If it's evil, it's gonna disseminate all the way down. It basically is gonna set the culture, and that's gonna be the way that the entire agency, top to bottom, operates. And the other thing too that I want to point out about it, and I'm not like blaming them or every single person that goes into it, because I think some people probably go into it for the right reasons. But the other part of it too that you have to think about and keep in mind is that it's also because of the things that they have to do, right? To match what China does, what Russia does, what Israel does, what any country, name any country that you don't like. To match what they're doing, you have to do the same thing, right? Or equal or greater, to be able to beat them out. And that's the thing, is like, and again, I'm not castigating everyone in there. I'm not saying they're all bad people, but it's like some amount of that is probably attributable to the position that they find themselves in and how they have to act in those positions. And if you do that day in and day out, what you sow is what you reap, right? And so if you're doing evil things day in and day out, well, then you're going to become more and more evil. And those things are going to become more and more common to you. And so you're willing to do more. You're willing to go further. So it's not just, that first point of, okay, they're there forever, it's a permanent institution and it rots down, but it's also, some percentage of it is because of the situation that they're in that has cultivated those types of people to the top.
Just that it's obvious, and it's something that has been in multiple intelligence communities have been ensnared in this. Again, I highly recommend Daryl Cooper's episode on the entire Epstein saga, because I didn't know about this case in Northern Ireland.
Am I allowed to listen to that?
Oh, right.
I was incredibly informed by Mark Levin that he was a Holocaust denier.
Oh, I mean, words are supposed to have meaning, and
but can I ask about the neocons who are? I mean, keep in mind that it was Jay Lefkowitz, who's Bill Kristol's lawyer, who represented the Weekly Standard when I worked there, who was an Epstein lawyer.
Yeah.
And so, where's Mark Levin on Epstein? I noticed that all these very voluble people who do not hesitate before imposing their opinions on the rest of us suddenly don't have very strong opinions about Epstein. What is that?
Every accusation is actually an admission. And
but why is Mark Levin covering for Epstein? That's weird.
That's a great question. And in particular, when he's going to accuse you of being funded by the Qatari government. And
if only.
Right. That's what I mean about the
implicated.
Accusation is the admission.
Qatari government.
The accusation, they could concoct all these wild schemes about how Steve Witkoff or me or you or anybody else is funded by the state of Qatar. When in reality, as you know, it's like, you guys want to talk about foreign funding?
Well,
let's go. Let's take a look at your C3s and release all of the data.
Wild.
I would be happy to take a look at it for you.
Especially Qatar. I found out last night at dinner you went to high school in Qatar.
Yes, I did. Yeah, they love to use that one. I went to high school, my last 2 years, American School of Doha. By the way, I don't think the Qatari government likes me very much, because I've talked quite a bit about how a lot of migrant laborers are abused there. But of course, they still find that tenuous connection as some sort of, admission. Supposedly I'm funded. The only people who fund me are my business and the people who are premium subscribers, which is great. And that's part of the reason I can speak the way that I am. I literally dare them to disclose their donors and those ties to the Israeli government and the Israel lobby. I dare them to do it, and they never will, or any of the other foreign governments governments that directly prop them up. And this brings us to Epstein. Why, the Leslie Wexner Foundation under Jeffrey Epstein paid Ehud Barak $2.3 million to write 2 papers. I believe he did not even finish the second one. This is a nonprofit funnel, of money.
Really?
What's going on with that?
Can I get that gig?
Yeah, that sounds like a great gig. For anybody out there who's struggling with their bills, money is easy, okay? Whenever you're willing to engage in a lot of very sketchy behavior. And this is a pattern I've noticed all across Washington, is that they ignore strategically the Epstein story because it's inconvenient. And it's not even really inconvenient. I think it's just so deeply enmeshed here. And I just bring it back to Alex Acosta. He told us the truth once, or not us, he told them the truth once in sworn testimony. He belonged to intelligence. And we've never, with Maxwell, who we have all of these documented ties to Mossad and to the intelligence community and all of these sketchy dealings. And then his daughter working with Epstein. We have the Wexner Foundation, which we know is highly involved in Zionist interests here in the United States of America. We have Epstein as well, who's been linked to some of these organizations, or at least through funneling money via the Wexner Foundation. We know about his past, with money laundering. For what purpose? That is the crux of the intelligence community's ability to move things around and to pay for extremely off the books activity. It traces back to the lying, as you said. That's part of why we can't have the truth around pro-Zoran.
I get it.
But when he says, hey, I'm just worried about the rent and I don't care about Israel because I'm going to stay here in New York.
I loved it.
I loved it too. That's what all we need. That's what all people really want. I remember when Trump first term withdrew from Paris and he said, I was elected to be the president of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And I was like, wow.
So that's the problem
one
with
of
this
the most
Epstein
important
thing.
thing.
The problem with the
Yes.
DOJ decision yesterday to cover up the crimes of Epstein, which they are doing, is that it leaves people at the very end of their electoral options. It's like, I voted for this guy, and I'll speak for myself. I voted for this guy precisely because I'm really distressed. I want justice. I want honesty. I think secrecy abets evil. I want someone to focus on my country, like all the basic things. And I think Trump wants all those things too. But when you allow something like this to happen, people are like, you know what? The system itself is beyond reform. There's no reasonable step I can take to improve this country or my own life. I have to do something crazy.
Yes.
Like you're creating.
And that's exactly the point that I'm saying, or that I was saying originally, where, yes, this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because there's so many things where, on both sides, where everyone's just getting pissed off about something. And I feel like this is one where everyone can get behind it and can catalyze and say, this is wrong, and we're tired of being lied to, and this is BS. And that's the thing about it, is that it is so insane. And if there's anything that is going to, and any point in time, right? Because it happened with JFK, right? Where JFK was assassinated, and pretty much everyone, the videotape finally got released, and everyone knew right there and then. But there was less ability for people to speak up about it. Now, anyone who has a microphone and a video camera can state their piece online and create a growing symphony of voices to basically say, we're not going to stand up for this anymore, and we're going to continue to talk about it. And so the ability to do that is much more unique to the time that we find ourselves in now. And also, by the way, there are high-profile figures that are going out, and they're able, they're speaking out against it because they're not bought and paid for anymore. They're doing their own independent thing because of their conscience or whatever it is. And so that is very unique to today as well. And so, again, I think it is possible, as Tucker is saying, where people just get so fed up because there's so many things going. There's all these wars. I feel like it's two big prongs. Is number one, all the wars that are going on right now, and number two, the corruption. And by corruption, I'm talking about, basically this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. And I think there are a lot of other examples of it as well. But if you're talking about the corruption and then the wars, where it's essentially forever wars that we're constantly shipping billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars to, and I think everyone is getting pissed off about this. And so if there's a time that is right for people to rise up and finally say enough is enough, I think that's now. And so that's why I think, again, it could cause a huge uprising of people. And what they were talking about just previous to this was Zoran Mamdani getting elected or going through the primary to be the Democratic candidate to be the mayor of New York. That's exactly it. Is that you're gonna start seeing people, and this was I made this point in a few of my other videos, but you're gonna start to see people who are completely outside and say, I want to upset the entire system. I want to overthrow the apple cart. I want to overturn it. I'm completely fed up. And any politician that's willing to say that and be able to navigate social media and, basically promote themselves is going to get a seat at the table. And when enough of those start happening, because again, they're just not listening to us. Like, it basically feels like you're getting, dumped on day after day and event after event. And like, at a certain point, you just want to overthrow the system. And that more and more and more of these people are going to get in, and they're going to be able to basically outperform people who are getting basically bought and paid for by AIPAC, aka Israel. So like, again, hopefully that's the way it manifests, and that we just start throwing out all these politicians and actually make reform so that this cannot happen again. But yeah, it's been a slippery slope, and I think the people that are in charge have gotten so used to being able to lie to us and cheat and just treat us in the worst ways possible that they get more and more bold. You get used to it, and then you take another step. It's like boiling a frog, right? But at a certain point in time, you've completely cooked the frog. And, again, when that happens, I think the U.S. is, there's going to be some manifestation of it one way or another.
True radicalism when you do stuff like this. Because what's the option?
Well, that's why, in a way, I want to hold a lot of these leaders to a higher standard, is because if you're elected on that message and you betray that message, in my opinion, you're more culpable than, let's say, the idiots like George W. Bush and others who really believed it, right? They believed what they destroyed our country.
I
absolutely.
agree.
But they, at the very least, they didn't lie to us as much about wanting to address the very problems that they created. But when you have people like Obama, Biden, and Trump who are elected right now on the backs of fixing the most catastrophic presidency probably in American history, George W. Bush, but then to return to many, or in many cases, even go further and not actually address those, I think you're very culpable in that. And you reap what you sow. I mean, you said you're not a radical. I'm similar in disposition. Like, I don't want to see mass violence or any of these other.
Well, you're a married father.
Yeah,
you're
right.
Like I am too. It's
Right.
totally vested in the future of the country.
Exactly. I don't want that to happen.
No.
But as an analyst or as somebody familiar with history, somebody who has an audience and can pick up on social trends, people are mad as hell right now. They are angry.
Too mad.
Angry.
Too mad.
Yes.
No, I agree. I'm legit. That Epstein thing, it's not even about Epstein. I think I know what the Epstein thing was. Everybody knows what it was. I think YouPorn is the same thing.
Yes.
They're collecting information to blackmail people on YouPorn. Do you think a foreign government doesn't have access to the back end of YouPorn? I think they do. And so I get it. I understand, everyone knows what's up. But to insult the population by saying, no, you're a conspiracy theorist, it's like, I think you're really playing with fire when you do that.
Especially when you said the conspiracy and then now revert
it's
to
too
the
much.
lie.
It's too much.
That is too much.
Do you know, can you call Pam Bondi and say, I think Pam Bondi's under a ton of pressure. Again, I've always liked Pam Bondi. I know her. I think she's under enormous pressure. I don't know how good she is under pressure. I'm trying to be nice. But I don't think that she's like a sinister person who is doing the work of Leon Black and Ehud Barak on purpose, really. But I wonder if they know this is a real thing here.
They have to know. And the reason why I think they have to know is that the breadcrumbs that got us to this moment have already been sprinkled. Kash Patel testified and said it was suicide. Went on the Joe Rogan podcast and said, if I had that information, don't you think I would tell you? He killed himself. That was basically, this was an enshrinement of many of the things that they already put out there.
And the other thing to call out too, that I'm not sure, I think it happened after this was taped and released was the very incriminating, again, I referenced it earlier, but where it was like Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, a bunch of people sitting at a table, and Pam Bondi was getting asked about the Jeffrey Epstein thing. And Trump basically interrupts and is like, are we still talking about this guy? He basically tried to hard divert off of Jeffrey Epstein, which again, just when you view that, it's just like, oh my God, like how insanely criminal and just how criminal and how guilty do you look in your actions? Like your actions and your words speak very loudly here. And he was just like, how, this is years old. Why are we still talking about this? It was just the most out of touch and completely just and the stark contrast in what he normally does. If you listen to any of his interviews or when, CNN or ABC or someone that he doesn't like comes out and asks a question, what he does is he comes out and he basically will like berate them and like answer them directly, prove them why they're wrong, whether you agree with what he's saying or not. He'll have something where he just completely runs them over, answering their question, and then pivots on to what he wants to talk about or calls them out for being rude or whatever it is. Like that's just his basic playbook of how he handles everything. But with this, he's literally trying to divert the conversation. He's trying to downplay it. He's trying to, why are we even still talking about this? He doesn't go on the offensive like he normally does. And the biggest tell when someone is in this instance implicated, but if someone is lying or if someone is not telling the truth or being subversive, is that they change their behavior pattern. And that's the biggest tell. And the way that he answered that question, or didn't want her to, because he was even like, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. And that's the thing, is like when someone acts in that way, you're doing something wrong. 100% you're doing something wrong. You are implicated. There's no question in my mind. And again, I think it happened right after this, so I don't think they talk about it, but that to me was like the biggest red flag, because it's all still like, we don't have the smoking gun because it's being covered up, but to me that is the biggest of red flags. And I don't think they talk about it because of that, but just something that I wanted to bring up that was like, that completely flipped me, where I'm like, yeah, man, you did it. 100%. That's why I'm on that side now. Again, there could be other justifications that I could see, but I am falling heavily on the, he did bad stuff with minors on video.
Criticism and really the outrage over each of those individual comments. Let's say the so-called Epstein files released with many of the influencers. There was outrage at every step. So they're not stupid.
But how can you say that thousands of children were raped, but I'm not going to find out who raped them?
Yeah.
How can you say that?
I agree completely.
They said that. By the way, when Pam Bondi went on television and said, I have a videotape of kids getting abused, I followed this case closely, and I know a lot of the people involved, as I've told you. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. I didn't know that. Really? Thousands of children got raped?
Yeah.
Who raped them? Where are the rapists? Like, why aren't they in jail? What? This is the Department of Justice.
Yes.
That is so crazy. This is honestly one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I just think it's very dangerous to play around with this stuff. Like, very dangerous.
Well,
I don't want a revolution, but if you wanted a revolution, this is how you would act.
Yes, yeah, it is. Because, I gave Versailles as an example. When you pick the court over...
And that's the thing is, Tucker makes a very good point there, because I know people who are so animated over child trafficking. Like, I had a friend who constantly would just over and over, and it's a mother, she has a few children, she would constantly on her Instagram feed, just in her stories, just constantly child trafficking, because that is something that, again, everyone can get behind and is so animating because it's so wrong. Like, I think 100% of people basically would just say, no, that's where I draw the line. This is not appropriate. And so, especially if things start to leak out, and it gets to a certain point, like if anything becomes available and we can say this is the person that did it, or this institution or this group of people are gonna, again, that's why I think it is, I put it at very low probability, but I 100% think that it is possible that people will just overthrow the entire apple cart, just completely overturn it. I'm done, I'm pissed off, there's going to be an uprising. It is a possibility. Truly, I think so. All right, and that pretty much does it for their coverage of the actual Epstein component of it. They talk about some other things in there as well that are pretty interesting. So if you are, interested in their conversation, feel free to go take a look at that. But if you like the video, feel free to give me a thumbs up right below. If you found this interesting and you'd like to see more content from me, hit the subscribe button. It really does help my channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.